today I'm going to show you how to do a background that you want to be soft. Yeah, you can come up and watch. So in this flower, in this painting, there are two main flowers. It's called Asaganthera and Asaganthera. It's a little bit of an unusual flower. But I've got my main flower here, and then I've got a secondary flower here. And I couldn't decide at first whether I wanted both flowers in sharp focus. I've got that option here. This one's slightly out of focus, and I decided that I really wanted this second one to be slightly out of focus. So I want soft edges, and you can see when I did this background, I don't have a hard edge here. So I'm not going to work on that part of it today, but I just went over this complete part when I was coming down here and didn't let it drip too much into it. Today what I want to do is get this part of the background underneath, and I think I want to use these sort of paler blue colors, so it kind of picks up some of those colors. And then spread maybe into a little bit more greeny color. So to do that, to leave that there. Okay. To do that, I'm going to wet over. Okay. Somebody didn't clean her brush. I want especially the corners to be soft. Usually, as you get to the edges, you want something to soften out, and especially near the corner. So this is a bit of an exception because I kind of like that there. But I want this to be soft on the corners, so I am painting right over these edges. Because if I wanted them hard, I would very carefully go over and around those petals. And then I would get the nice hard edge that I did here. So I'm going to actually paint around this main petal and leave that a little bit harder. I'll paint right over what I painted before. There. And I also want a little bit of a harder edge right around the center. So that's going to be a little bit more in focus because I think that little bit of a center is kind of interesting. So it doesn't show up very much. And it's out of focus there. I have to actually angle my vision to make sure that I've got what I want wet. I'm not really going to go up here, but just in case.
Are you ever grabbing color when you go over?
Oh, probably a bit, because these aren't, I tend to use granulating colors and not staining colors in there.
Is there a reason why you use granulating colors
in
your background?
Yeah, because I like them. I like this granulating effect, right?
Yeah.
So, and I like the colors to be, I like the brightest colors to be on the, the main subject. So I like to use, like I often will mix, this has to be more sharply. I'll mix French ultramarine and burnt sienna. So I'm going to do this a little bit, just making sure that the water is sort of even. And with this, get some of these set out here. These are not expensive brushes. They're Princeton, and they hold a nice point, but they're just synthetic. I sometimes use synthetic blends. So there's a little bit of an edge showing up here. It's a little bit sharper, and then it's going to blend off there. That's the theory anyway. So then, I've done this before. Everything's out of order. But yeah, it's good to start by just misting your paints a little bit in advance, and then you can give them a little chance to soften up. So I like to have 2 water containers, a big one that I can keep kind of light, and a littler one that I can get dirty. So I'm mixing cobalt blue. I want a softer blue than this. And I'm mixing a little bit of sap green into it. I want to see if that's a little bit strong, but it will dilute. I think a little bit of that. I think that's probably better. So we're going to test it and see how much it spreads. Not too much. Okay. And I think this is cerulean here. I think as it gets into the corner. Geez, I can't tell my can't see my. Oh, I guess this goes all the way up there. Now, I'm letting it, I'm not getting too close, as it's still really flowing quite a lot. I want to mingle it like that a little bit. I never knew when my teacher, Karen Heine, said, why are you doing that? And it's because otherwise the water will drip back in.
Ah, from the edge of the frame.
Yeah, from the edge of the frame. So you can see there's a little bit of granulation coming. And I want the color to be a little bit bluer here. I should have drawn this a little darker before I started, because I'm not quite sure that. So I've let that dry. So that will definitely give me a little bit of a harder edge. But that edge should be spreading. And as it dries, I'll come in and add a little bit more. And I also want it darker. A little bit darker right here. And I've left this dry so that I can get this. It's 140 pounds Winsor Newton stretched.
What stretching board is that?
What, stretcher board?
Mm-hmm.
Well, at one time you could get these at Art World,
Oh.
but you can't anymore. Okay, so I have to. Guess this goes like this.
Did you ever start with the flower and then do the backgrounds, or have you always done it this way?
Well, I started out with botanicals like that, where there aren't any background, right? That's what Karen Heine used to do. I generally now, well, the reason I didn't like that is because I want the flower to be the lightest thing. I want that to have the glow. And when the paper's white, you know, you're always having to do the flower darker to make it show up. So then I needed dark backgrounds, and I just think it's easier to start with the background because, you know, everybody's afraid to put that first bit of paint on the paper. And at the background, you can be loose. You cannot worry about it so much. You know, you're probably going to put another layer on top. If you get something you like, you can save it. There's a lot more freedom there. And then you're committed. You've got it started. But you need to think, where do I want it dark? Where do I want it light? So if you get, I want a soft edge. And this is almost could be softer here. Because I just want that suggested. But here, maybe it's a little bit too soft, so I can kind of state my white bit. I always check that it's dry before I can use a brush, or I can use a bit of Kleenex if I want to sort of redefine that line a little bit. Same thing here. I can just pick this up a little bit like that, and then just soften it. Depends how soft I want it, but you don't want a sharp edge there between where it's soft and where it's, you know, you want it gradually to go into being soft. So I want that color to gradually. Now I can come in with a little bit darker color, and I think this is actually got some. I think that was supposed to be white. I couldn't see my drawing. Having a little trouble with my eyes, actually. Got a cataract developing. Yeah, not so much fun. Okay, so I think this should really have been white. The thing is, everybody's really afraid of watercolors, and okay, so I did blue where it was supposed to be white. Not really the end of the world. Because this is going to be soft. If I wanted a really hard edge, I would have kind of been a little more careful. But working these edges here, and this is fairly sharp there. I always end up going where I'm not supposed to go. Well, I had wet that, so. Yeah, I know that about myself, and I usually wet, you know, further. So it's starting to dry now. The edges are getting a little more.
What color glue are you using now?
Well, it's always a mixture. There's a bit of Winsor in there. This is mostly cobalt.
That's cobalt.
I've mixed it with a little bit. There's some cerulean in here. I always mix my blues up. I have more blues than any other color. I want to keep this fairly light though. Here. And that one's toast. going to do this. Oops. I don't want too much of that running in because it tends to run in a straight line. But see, when you mix the colors like that, the granulation's coming out, which I really like. And if you've got a little speck, you can just pick it up like that. And I'll just sort of keep working the edges a bit. I think right in here, I think this needs to come out a little bit. But because it's just an impression, if it's not exactly right, it's not the end of the world. But this green needs to that white a little bit more. Generally, if you pull it out, you've got to replace it with water, or you don't have the same amount of water everywhere. Oops.
Oops.
I didn't want
You're
that.
not getting any of those rings. Sometimes you get rings of paint.
You mean a dark line at the edge?
Yeah.
I call that a tide line.
Tide lines. Or where it gets wet, where it's been wet before, and then there's a ring at the edge.
Like a cauliflower or a backwash?
Not a cauliflower, just a...
A dark line.
Yeah.
It's because you've got too much water and too much paint, and when you spread it, it ends up on the edges, just like the ocean will wash things up, and then
Yeah.
it recedes and it leaves that little bit of paint there.
And that's because there's too much...
You've had a bit too much water in too confined a space, so there's nowhere else for it to go, and it
so it
sticks
pushed it.
along the edges. Yeah. So what you're looking for, like, I just want to soften this a little bit more. Maybe I'll just do this. I just want it kind of flowing out. I think I can do this too. I did wet this at the beginning, up here. So let's just this could start spreading out some of that. So it's try and if you're going over something like that, use a pretty light touch. I think it's almost at the point where I just want to leave it now. It's a little bit sharp right in there, and this petal, this up top petal, is going to be a little bit sharper. But it's soft in here. I think there's this little bit. Where am I here? Yeah, I'm not quite sure whether that, I've got that marked, but I can't even read it right now, so I think I'll leave it. I can deal with that later on. I'm not quite sure what it is.
In this picture, it's really sharp.
Well, that's this little bit, and
Okay.
I've kept that white, but on the other side of it, just right here,
Oh, okay.
is what I'm not quite sure. But I want it just to soften out, and I think that's going to be okay. It's starting to dry now, so that's when you've got to be careful. Pick up anything like that. When, you know, if you add more stuff as it's starting to dry. So I want that impression that this is a second flower. This will be a little more detailed and right in there, and this is going to stay sharp. But this just kind of is fading off the page. So I'll just put it up here for a minute and look back at it. Yeah, I think that's going to be okay. So then I'm going to lie it flat. Just notice there's a bit there that's absolutely dry, and it could start doing some weird blossoms or something. Okay, so that's how you get a soft edge. And then there's a little hard edge right there. The hard edges are over here. I've wet carefully around the background to get those and kept this dry. But for a soft edge, you have to be really brave and wet the whole thing and then come in and let the color blend a bit. But it's really worth doing, and it's a nice contrast with your main flower, especially if your secondary flower is near the corner. So that's a little bit on backgrounds and a little bit on edges.